Dawn drifted over the Montana frontier like a fragile promise, its pale gold light spilling across the empty road that led into Willow Bend. The air still carried the chill of night, and the dust swirled in slow spirals, caught between the waking world and whatever dreams the land had held before sunrise. In that half-light walked a woman who looked as though she had been folded and unfolded by hardship too many times to count. Mara Keene, thin as a starved willow, wrapped in a calico dress that had forgotten its original color. Boots cracked open like tired lips. She walked as though each step owed an apology to the earth. Her breath came shallow, almost reverent, and when she looked at the town, it was with the fragile hope of someone who had learned to expect nothing but was praying for something anyway. Willow Bend was only beginning to stir. A ranch hand brushed off his porch. The seamstress hung her sign. The faint smell of wood smoke drifted from the boarding house kitchen. Yet every eye that noticed Mara flicked away quickly, sometimes with pity, sometimes with suspicion. A stranger in rags was never a welcome sight in a quiet frontier town. Mara tried not to shrink under their gaze. She clutched her small bundle of belongings, little more than a worn shawl and a tin cup, and whispered to herself, "One chance, just one. Don't falter." Her stomach ached with hunger. Still she kept her spine straight. Her first stop was the seamstress shop, an old wooden door with fading blue paint, its windows crowded by dresses she could only imagine ever wearing. Inside stood Odette Granger, a woman as stiff as the starch she used. Odette didn't even hide her disapproval when Mara asked if there was work. Hemming, mending, scrubbing the floor, anything. "Work," Odette repeated, her voice slick with judgment. "We run a respectable establishment here. I can't hire someone who looks like she's been sleeping in the dirt." A couple of women sorting lace snickered. One whispered too loudly, "Probably trouble-born." Mara swallowed the burn of shame. She lowered her gaze and said gently, "Thank you for considering it." That small grace, thanking someone who had offered nothing, seemed to irritate Odette further. Mara stepped back onto the street, dust pressing into the worn fabric of her skirt. Her cheeks burned, but her resolve didn't crack. She had grown used to closed doors, but not numb. A small part of her was grateful she wasn't numb. Numbness was how she had lost herself once before. Her second stop was Elias Granger's general store, and though he shared Odette's last name, he did not share her hardness. Elias watched Mara's trembling hands as she asked if he needed sweeping done. He considered her with a softer eye, though suspicion still lingered beneath. "Times are lean," he said slowly. "Still, can't hurt to tidy the storeroom." He handed her a broom and a crust of day-old bread. Mara accepted both with a gratitude so genuine it startled him. While sweeping, she moved with quiet purpose, humming under her breath, a small, broken melody that she used to stitch her nerves together. Elias eventually spoke. "Folks talk. Don't let it send you running. Town's wary of strangers, is all. I'm not here to trouble anyone," she whispered. He nodded, but the caution in his eyes remained. She swept until her arms trembled. When she left the store, some of the townspeople watched her, murmuring, "Where'd she crawl out from?" Someone said she came from the foothills. "She's hiding something, you just wait." Each word sliced, but Mara kept her gaze forward, breath steady. She had fled worse things than gossip, and she had promised herself nobody would chase her from this new beginning, not until she'd truly tried to build a life. She reached the edge of town by noon. Her legs had grown unsteady, and her head spun from hunger. She leaned against a fence post to catch her breath. That was when she heard the low, rhythmic thump of hooves, steady as a heartbeat. A wagon rolled toward the general store, drawn by two chestnut Mares, and atop it sat Rhett Callahan, a man carved from sun, grief, and responsibility. His coat was dusted with the road, his hat tilted low, shadowing eyes that had forgotten how to soften. Beside him sat two girls, June, tall for her 11 years, guarded, and Ruby, younger, clutching a small toy horse to her chest. Mara stepped aside instinctively, giving room for their wagon to pass. But Rhett noticed her, the way a man might notice weather shifting or a coyote watching from the grass. His eyes lingered on the frayed hem of her dress, the bruise blooming around her wrist she'd try to hide, the hunger hollowing her cheeks. June followed her father's gaze, and her little jaw tightened. Ruby simply stared, curious and unafraid. Mara lowered her head quickly. Rhett climbed down first, steadying Ruby with gentle hands before she hopped off the wagon seat. His movements were controlled, practiced, yet edged with the stillness of someone who had lost too much too suddenly. When he stepped into Elias' store, the bell jingled like a tremor in the quiet morning. Mara watched him disappear through the doorway, then turned away, hugging herself against the bite of the wind. Later that afternoon, Mara searched for a place to rest. The boarding house was far beyond what her coins could afford, so she followed a dirt path to the outskirts of town, where an old half-collapsed barn leaned against the wind. Grass grew wild around its posts. The roof sagged, but the walls stood well enough to shelter her from night. She crouched inside, fingers trembling as she laid her shawl on the dirt floor. Exhaustion washed over her so heavily she nearly wept. But instead, she hummed again, that same soft tune, a lullaby she barely remembered learning. Above her, through a crack in the roof, the sky revealed a single bright star. "Just one chance," she whispered again. "I'll stay alive for that." Sleep came slowly, like a cautious visitor. She rose before dawn the next morning, brushing straw from her dress. Her body ached, but her spirit held steady. She would try again, this time at the ranches outside town. There was always work in dirt and sweat, even for a woman with nothing. The Callahan Ranch was the first she reached, a stretch of land kissed by morning light, horses grazing near the fence line, and smoke curling from the chimney of the main house. She hesitated at the gate, nervous. Wealth lived here. Wealth rarely welcomed rags. But she pushed forward. She always had. At the porch stood Clara Mae Bristow, the ranch cook, broad-shouldered, hair in a tight bun, expression carved sharp as flint. Clara Mae nearly turned Mara away before a single word was spoken. "We're not hiring," she said flatly. "I'll take any work," Mara answered softly. "Cleaning, hauling water, tending horses. I'm willing." Clara Mae studied her, really studied her, and saw the exhaustion beneath the courage. She crossed her arms, but didn't shut the door. "What's your name?" "Mara Keene." Clara Mae huffed. "Fine. One day. You mess up, you're gone." Inside the house, the Callahan girls peeked through a window. Ruby waved excitedly. June tugged her back, unsure. Mara was sent to the stables, and though her hands shook from hunger, she worked with quiet reverence, brushing horses with slow strokes, speaking to them in a soothing whisper. Her humming filled the barn, and even the skittish mare calmed beneath her touch. Rhett arrived just before noon. He stood in the doorway, watching Mara as she worked. Dust motes drifted around her like quiet little fireflies, catching the light. Something in him softened without permission. "You cleaning the whole barn?" he asked quietly. Mara startled. "Clara Mae said to make it neat." "Well," he said, voice deep and even, "you've done more than neat." Ruby appeared at his side, wide-eyed. "Pa," she sings to the horses. "They like it." June appeared, too, arms crossed over her chest. She looked at Mara like she was a puzzle with missing pieces. Rhett nodded once. "We'll see how the day goes." The hours passed slowly but steadily. Mara repaired a loose gate latch, scrubbed feed buckets, carried water until her arms throbbed. She took care not to intrude on the family, moving quietly, almost invisibly, yet kindness seemed to float around her like some gentle aura. That evening, as sun dipped behind the hills, Ruby tugged at Mara's dress hem. "I saved a biscuit from supper," she said shyly. "It's for you, 'cause you look like you need it more." Mara's throat tightened. "Thank you, sweetheart." June hovered behind Ruby, pretending she wasn't paying attention, but watching closely. Mara sat on the porch steps to eat the biscuit, savoring each bite. She looked out at the fading light, at the warm silhouette of the ranch house, at the girls whispering to each other inside, at Rhett standing by the corral with shoulders too heavy for one man. For the first time in a long while, something warm stirred beneath the ribs of her heart. Not safety, not yet, but the faintest hint of belonging. She held on to that feeling as night wrapped itself around the ranch like a dark, gentle blanket. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope that tomorrow might still hold something kind. Days at the Callahan Ranch moved like slow river water, steady, quiet, carving change into the people it touched. Mara woke before sunrise each morning, slipping from the small room Clara May had given her, feeling the faint shock of gratitude each time her feet touched a wooden floor instead of dirt. She moved through the house softly, careful not to disturb the stillness that clung to early dawn. She brewed coffee for Rhett before he saddled the horses, swept the porch, then headed to the barn where the animals waited with patient eyes. The Callahan girls began to drift toward her in gentle, curious steps, never pushed, never hurried. Ruby often appeared with her hair in a tangle, wordlessly offering a brush. Mara would sit with her in the morning light and braid her hair into soft, neat plaits. June watched from a distance at first, arms crossed tight over her chest, a fortress built from loss. But even she found herself hovering close, drawn by something she didn't yet trust but wanted. It wasn't love, not yet, but something like the shadow of love, stretching slowly toward them all. Clara May noticed it too. "You've got a calming way," she said one morning as she kneaded dough. "House feels less hollow with you here." Mara looked down, cheeks warm. "I only try to be useful." "Useful's one thing," Clara May muttered. "But healing? That's another." Mara said nothing, but her hands trembled slightly over the wash basin. Healing was a word she had never dared to believe belonged anywhere near her. That peace lasted 3 days. 3 days before trouble found her again. It came in the form of Sheriff Lyman Crow, riding up the ranch road with the weight of official business pulling down his posture. Rhett spotted him first and walked out to meet him, wiping sweat from his brow. "Mornin', Sheriff," Rhett greeted, voice polite but wary. "What's got you out this way?" Crow tipped his hat. "Looking for someone. A woman. Says her name's Mara Keene." The air seemed to snap in half. Mara froze where she stood with a pail in her hands, heart crawling up into her throat. Ruby, who had been helping her pick wildflowers, sensed the shift and wrapped her arms around Mara's waist. Rhett's eyes flicked toward Mara, searching, protective. "What's this about?" he asked. "Trouble, I reckon," the sheriff replied. "A man came through town this morning, looking for her. Claims she ran off, owing him coin and property. Says she's a thief." The pail slipped from Mara's hands and hit the dirt with a hollow thud. "I didn't steal anything," she whispered. "I only ran." Rhett stepped closer to her, voice gentle. "Tell me the truth, Mara. I need to know." Her breath shook. She didn't want to speak, didn't want to drag her past into this place that felt, in small, fragile ways, like the first home she'd known in years. But running had never saved her, not truly. And Rhett was waiting with eyes that weren't accusing, only concerned. "That man," she began quietly, "Thorn Pike. He kept me working for him. Sewing, cooking, whatever he wanted. He took everything I earned. Said I owed him my life for debts I never agreed to. When I asked to leave, he hurt me." She lifted her sleeve just enough to show a faint bruise that hadn't fully healed. June, who had been listening from the porch steps, flinched. "I didn't steal from him," Mara added. "I only wanted my freedom." The sheriff frowned. "Pike didn't mention that." "He wouldn't," Mara said simply. Rhett looked at her for a long, heavy moment, long enough for her heartbeat to thunder in her ears. Then he nodded. "She stays," he said firmly, "until the law sorts this out." The sheriff agreed, leaving with a warning that Pike might return. And he did. Not that night, but the next, when the sky was bruised purple and thunder rolled like the growl of an angry god. Mara was in the barn brushing down a mare when she heard the crunch of hooves outside. She froze. The mare's ears pricked nervously, catching the tension that radiated through her. A tall shape staggered inside, the smell of whiskey arriving before the man did. "Thorn Pike." His grin was sharp and hungry. "There you are, girl. Thought you could hide behind some rancher's skirt." Mara backed away slowly, hands raised instinctively, breath trembling. "You need to leave, Thorn." "You belong to me," he hissed. "And you know it." A crash of thunder shook the walls. The mare reared. Mara flinched. Then, Rhett's voice sliced through the barn doorway like steel through fog. "No," he said. "She doesn't." Rhett stood tall, rain dripping from his hat brim, eyes blazing with a quiet, unmovable fury. He wasn't a gunman, wasn't a fighter, but he was a father and a good man, and that was more dangerous than any weapon. Thorn spat at the ground. "You don't know what she's done." "I know enough," Rhett said. "I know she's kind. I know she's honest. And I know you hurt her." Thorn lurched forward, hand twitching toward his belt. But before he could draw breath for a threat, another voice boomed behind him. "That's enough, Pike." Sheriff Crow stepped inside, rifle leveled. "I got a telegram from Wyoming," he said. "Seems you're wanted for more than unpaid debts. Fraud, assault, and a whole ledger of other sins." Thorne's face curdled. "That girl's lying." "No," the sheriff said flatly. "She's the only one who ain't." The standstill lasted a heartbeat too long. Tense, breathless, a moment when the entire barn seemed to hold itself still. Then Crow stepped forward, cuffing Thorne with the ease of a man long accustomed to wrangling fools. Thorne cursed, fought, spit, but it didn't matter. He was finished. As the sheriff dragged him out into the storm, Thorne shouted Mara's name, as though it were a curse. But Mara didn't shrink this time. She didn't bow her head. She stood tall, trembling but unbroken. When the barn finally fell quiet, except for rain on the roof, Mara's knees gave way. She crumpled to the ground, breath shaking with years of fear finally loosening. And then, small footsteps. Ruby ran to her, throwing tiny arms around her neck. June followed more slowly, silently placing a hand on Mara's shoulder. "You're safe now," Ruby whispered. Mara let out a sob she didn't know she'd been holding. Red approached, kneeling beside her. He didn't touch her. He simply stayed there, giving her the steadiness she'd never been offered by any man in her life. When she finally lifted her gaze to him, something in his eyes had shifted, softened, opened. The next morning dawned clear, sunlight dripping off the wet grass like liquid gold. Mara was feeding the horses when Rhett stepped into the barn, the smell of rain still clinging to the air. "You didn't sleep much," he murmured. She shook her head. "Didn't want to waste the quiet." He nodded, stepping closer. "My girls," Rhett said gently, "haven't asked for much since their mother passed. Their world's been small, careful, lonely in ways they don't have words for." Mara's breath caught. "But these last days," he continued, "I've seen things I thought were gone." Ruby laughing. June trusting. The house feeling warm again. He paused, voice dropping low. "Because of you." Mara swallowed hard. "I never meant to take anything that wasn't mine." "You gave," he said softly. "You didn't take." She looked down, tears slipping silently. Rhett exhaled, steadying himself. "I'm going to ask you something. You don't owe me an answer now, but I need to say it plain." Mara looked up. Rhett's voice was almost a whisper. "Will you stay here, with us? Will you be the mother my girls need?" A beat. "Will you stay because you want it and not because you're afraid of where else you might go?" The world seemed to hush around them. Wind softened. Horses stilled. Mara's heart, so used to bracing for loss, felt something shift, open, bloom. She didn't speak at first, didn't trust her voice not to break. Instead, she nodded once, small, trembling, utterly certain. Rhett closed his eyes in relief, and something warm, steady, and new took root between them. In the weeks that followed, the Callahan ranch changed in ways subtle and profound. Mara wore a simple blue dress Clara May sewed her. June began seeking her advice on small things, braiding her hair, sewing her saddle pouch, reading late into the night. Ruby clung to her at every turn. And Rhett found himself lingering in doorways, watching the three of them with a gentle awe that he didn't bother to hide. He didn't rush anything, didn't push. But every morning when he took his coffee from Mara's hands, his fingers brushed hers just a moment longer than necessary. And each time, she let them. One Sunday, under a sky as wide as forgiveness, the four of them saddled their horses. Rhett helped Mara onto hers, not because she needed the help, but because the gesture felt like a form of quiet devotion neither of them had language for yet. As they rode across the golden fields, June at Mara's side and Ruby laughing ahead, the ranch seemed alive with possibility. If you had been standing there on that ridge with them, feeling the wind tug at your coat, watching a once-broken woman ride with the posture of someone finally unafraid, you might have understood something the West teaches in whispers. That healing doesn't crash in like thunder. It arrives in small mercies, in steady hands, in the courage to stay, in the quiet choosing of one another again and again. And if your own heart feels worn thin at the edges, let this be a reminder. You are only one gentle place, one offered hand, one act of grace away from finding the home you didn't dare believe could ever be yours.